Prepare yourselves for a roller coaster ride of heartbreak, betrayal, and unstoppable resilience. In this gripping saga, you'll meet Leonard Kensington, a powerful CEO with a heart as cold as the marble floors of his global headquarters. He's hailed as a legend in the corporate world, but behind closed doors, his pregnant wife Naomi endures endless torment. When one final act of cruelty pushes her to flee, she leaves everything behind: her dreams, her home, and the child growing within her. As secrets unravel, alliances shift, and tragedy strikes, the question remains, will Leonard ever realize the true cost of his cruelty before it's too late? Leonard Kensington was the kind of man whose very presence commanded attention. Standing 6 feet, 2 inches tall, with broad shoulders and impeccably tailored suits, he radiated power wherever he went. Board meetings at Kensington Global Holding always revolved around him. His word was law, his vision unquestioned. Industry giants like Richard Branson and even Mark Cuban had occasionally praised Leonard's business acumen at corporate conferences. But all the accolades in the world could not hide a deep emotional void that seemed to define him. His wife, Naomi Kensington, formerly Naomi Pierce, had been drawn to his magnetic aura from the very moment they met. Naomi was soft-spoken, gentle, and possessed a natural warmth that illuminated every room she entered. She came from a modest background, raised in a simple suburban neighborhood by parents who loved her deeply. Meeting Leonard felt like stepping into another universe, one full of possibilities she never dared imagine. In the early years, their romance was so ardent that her friends teased she'd hit the love jackpot. Weekend escapes to the French Riviera, candlelit dinners high above city skyscrapers, and diamonds that sparkled like midnight constellations. Leonard had spared no expense to claim her heart. Yet beneath those extravagant gestures, an unsettling undercurrent had lurked. He was quick to anger, prone to controlling tendencies, and displayed an aloof detachment that cast shadows over their fairy tale beginnings. Despite the red flags, Naomi believed that genuine love could mend broken parts. She saw glimpses of kindness in Leonard, glimmers of devotion, that made her hope that in time he might open himself to real affection. Little did she know how dark the path ahead would become, and how much it would cost them both. Not long after their wedding, held in a lavish ceremony at the Kensington estate, small cracks began to form in the glossy surface of their life together. Naomi noticed how Leonard would leave for work before dawn without so much as a goodbye. She found scribbled notes on the kitchen counter, instructions about household chores or party preparations, never a gentle word or a sweet farewell. His business empire demanded his full attention, and to outsiders it was no surprise that Leonard was perpetually occupied. But Naomi started seeing signs that he took no joy in her presence. When he did return home, his mood would fluctuate wildly, sometimes leveling her with a disapproving glare if dinner wasn't set on time or if a glass was out of place. In the rare moments he seemed calm, Naomi would tentatively try to discuss what was happening between them. She suggested counseling softly at first, then more insistently. The result was always the same. He either dismissed her with icy silence or exploded in anger, accusing her of being weak, insecure, and ungrateful for the luxury she was living in. At one point, she confided in her old friend June Peterson, who worked as a nurse at Mount Sinai Hospital. June was concerned, urging Naomi to see a therapist, or at least share her fears with someone else. Naomi hesitated. She loved him. She believed in him. The vow she had taken felt sacred. She promised to keep trying, clinging to the thread of hope that the man she fell in love with would resurface. When Naomi discovered she was pregnant, she was overjoyed. She had always dreamed of having children, a little boy or girl, to fill their sprawling mansion with laughter and the pitter-patter of tiny feet. It felt like destiny. Maybe this baby would be the key to softening Leonard's hardened heart. For a brief moment, Naomi allowed herself to fantasize that her news would spark a new beginning. The day she told him, she set the scene with thoughtful care. A simple dinner at home, his favorite meal, and a small gift box containing a baby's onesie. She remembered how, for a flicker of a moment, his eyes lit up. A single genuine smile curved his lips, and Naomi's heart soared. "We're going to be parents," she whispered, tears of happiness filling her eyes. But his response was guarded. He muttered something about it being good timing, about how an heir would be beneficial to the company's legacy. The warmth she had hoped for turned into a chill that settled in the air. He didn't embrace her, didn't touch her belly, didn't share in her tears of joy. That night, Naomi went to bed with more questions than answers. In the following weeks, Leonard showed scant interest in prenatal appointments or discussions of nursery colours. He simply brushed off the details. The minimal support he gave was overshadowed by incessant complaints that her morning sickness was inconvenient, that she should pull herself together. The fairy tale that had once seemed possible began to disintegrate before her eyes. As Naomi's pregnancy advanced, Leonard's behavior took on a sinister edge. He hid behind an icy veneer of politeness, in public ensuring that nobody questioned his devotion as a husband. At corporate galas, he'd rest a possessive hand on Naomi's back smile for the cameras and praise her for glowing. In private, however, his words were barbed, his tone laced with contempt. Naomi's growing belly became a source of irritation for him, as if it physically manifested responsibility he refused to shoulder. If she felt faint or had to lie down due to pregnancy exhaustion, he'd roll his eyes, calling her dramatic. Once, in a fit of rage, he hurled a crystal vase across the living room because she dared to voice concern about him missing her ultrasound appointment. The situation worsened when Leonard's main competitor, Winston Technologies, launched an aggressive takeover strategy in Asia. Stress consumed him, and he unleashed his frustration on Naomi. The nights grew darker, the emotional abuse more brutal. There were moments when he'd berate her for hours, pointing out every perceived flaw, her body, her upbringing, her inability to act like a proper CEO's wife. Fear and dread began to eclipse Naomi's pregnancy glow. She started to experience panic attacks, her heart racing uncontrollably whenever she heard Leonard's footsteps echo in the hallway. The radiant joy of expecting their child had been overshadowed by a suffocating sense of isolation. Deep down, Naomi knew she couldn't let this continue for her sake, and for the innocent life growing inside her. Desperate for guidance, Naomi turned to a confidant she barely knew, Michelle Vargas, a quiet but keen observer who worked as Leonard's executive assistant. Michelle had been with the company for years. She'd seen Leonard rise from a promising entrepreneur to a near untouchable titan. In hushed tones, she admitted that he had always been cutthroat at work, but something in him had soured beyond the normal bounds of ambition. Michelle was aware of how he treated his employees. He was ruthless, demanding results at any cost. Some whispered behind his back that he treated people like disposable assets. In the break rooms, rumors swirled that even prominent figures, such as ex-investment partner Henry Townsend, had walked out on deals with Leonard due to irreconcilable moral differences. Seeing Naomi's tears one afternoon, when Leonard had stormed out of a meeting, Michelle offered her shoulder. Over cups of herbal tea in Naomi's private lounge, the two women talked. Naomi recounted the nights of cold indifference, the verbal assaults, and her increasing terror of what Leonard might do next. The baby's kicks were a constant reminder that an innocent life was caught in the crossfire. Michelle, though cautious, suggested Naomi quietly document everything, every instance of abuse, every threat, every manipulative action. She also advised Naomi to consult a lawyer in secret, at least to understand her rights and secure a financial safety net for herself and the unborn child. If Leonard discovered these secret steps, the consequences could be dire, but Naomi's determination to protect her child was now stronger than her fear. Armed with Michelle's advice, Naomi contacted an old acquaintance, Daniel Wu, a private investigator who had once worked for Naomi's father on a minor legal issue. Daniel's discreet nature and strong moral compass made him the ideal person to approach. He listened attentively, eyes flickering with concern as Naomi poured out her story. The plan was straightforward, yet risky. Daniel would gather evidence focusing on Leonard's off-the-record dealings, hidden finances, and personal misconduct. If Leonard truly posed a danger, having tangible proof could provide leverage for Naomi in a possible divorce or custody battle. Initially, Naomi shuddered at the thought of such a step. Despite everything, she still felt a thread of loyalty to the man she married, but the daily torment, combined with her maternal instincts, convinced her she had to protect herself and their unborn baby. Daniel began his work quietly. He tapped into corporate rumors, tracked suspicious financial transfers, and compiled testimonies from former employees too fearful to speak out publicly. Surprisingly, Leonard's name was linked to questionable business practices ranging from bribery allegations in Southeast Asia to suspicious partnerships in Eastern Europe. These revelations were nothing short of alarming. Yet the greatest heartbreak for Naomi wasn't the illicit corporate deals. It was the stark confirmation of Leonard's character. The man who once charmed her and swept her off her feet was not just ruthless, he was dangerously indifferent to the well-being of those around him. With each new piece of evidence, Naomi saw a path forming before her, albeit one fraught with peril. The pregnancy entered its third trimester, and Naomi's belly grew more pronounced by the day. With it came a heightened sense of vulnerability. Every night she'd clutch at the blankets, grappling with insomnia, haunted by nightmares of Leonard's fury. Her only solace was the rhythmic kick of her baby proof of life, hope, and resilience within her. One evening, Leonard returned home, unusually late. His face was drawn, eyes bloodshot, exuding an air of barely contained rage. He tossed his briefcase onto the couch, sending papers flying. Naomi attempted to greet him, but he brushed past her, seething. A scathing argument ensued. He called her incompetent, worthless, and accused her of failing in her duties as a wife. When she tried to defend herself, he hurled a lamp at the wall. Shaken, Naomi bolted to the bedroom, tears streaming. She sat on the bed, arms wrapped protectively around her belly, wondering how much more she could endure. Then, in the darkness, she heard him on the phone in the adjacent office. Quietly, she pressed her ear to the door. What she overheard made her blood run cold. He was speaking with someone about reassigning Naomi's shares in the company, pushing for a clause that would sign them over to him in the event of her incapacitation. The call ended with him saying, "I'll make sure she doesn't get in the way, no matter what it takes." Naomi's heart thundered in her chest. This was no longer mere emotional abuse. Her life was at stake. Over the next few days, Naomi felt trapped in a vortex of dread. She replayed Leonard's ominous words in her mind. Were they just threats? Or was he plotting something far more sinister? Every time she encountered him in the hallways of the mansion, the hair on her neck stood on end. His glare radiated resentment, as though he blamed her for every misfortune he experienced. Desperation led Naomi back to Daniel Wu. She confided in him about Leonard's phone call and shared her mounting terror. Daniel insisted that she prepare an exit strategy immediately. They agreed she should gather essentials documents, bank statements, valuable jewelry, and hide them in a secret storage unit. Daniel also advised Naomi to open a separate bank account under her maiden name, ensuring she had a financial cushion if she needed to leave in a hurry. Simultaneously, Naomi secretly reached out to Michelle. She asked for help in retrieving internal company memos or any other documents that could protect Naomi should Leonard attempt legal sabotage later. Michelle, risking her job, smuggled out files suggesting that Leonard was on the verge of finalizing some highly unethical deals. One slip and Naomi could face retaliation from one of Leonard's corporate adversaries, or worse, from Leonard himself. With each passing hour, Naomi's anxiety intensified, but buried within that fear was a spark of resolve. She no longer saw flight as defeat. She recognized it as a necessary step to safeguard her unborn child and potentially save her own life. The final straw arrived under the guise of a seemingly ordinary evening. Naomi was in the living room, diligently packing a small bag under the pretense of organizing baby items. Leonard stomped in, took one look at the partially packed suitcase, and erupted. His face contorted into a mask of rage. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded. Naomi's pulse roared in her ears, but she steadied her voice as best she could. "I'm preparing a hospital bag for when the baby arrives," she lied, mind racing. Leonard's eyes darted from the suitcase to Naomi's swollen belly. Disbelief twisted his features, and in that moment Naomi saw the dangerous flicker in his gaze, the same silent menace she'd witnessed months ago, but had foolishly hoped was a lapse of temper. His voice was eerily calm. "Don't you dare leave me. Don't even think about it," he said, stepping forward until he loomed over her. Naomi tried to back away, but he gripped her arm. Fear squeezed her heart. She thought of her baby, her precious child, who deserved more than this violent environment. Leonard's next words chilled her. "If you walk out, I'll ruin you. Financially, socially. No court in this country will grant you custody. You'll lose everything." That was it. The flash point. Naomi finally saw the depth of darkness in the man she once loved. Every maternal instinct screamed that if she stayed, she risked not only her future, but the life of her child. In that moment, her fear crystallized into unyielding determination. Naomi waited until Leonard was safely ensconced in a late-night conference call. Heart pounding, she grabbed her clandestinely packed go-bag and crept through the winding corridors of the mansion. She had chosen her timing carefully. Leonard's temperament soared at night, but his single-minded focus on business calls made him oblivious to anything else. On trembling legs, she crossed the dark driveway, where her car was already loaded with crucial documents, some clothing, and a hidden stash of cash. She slid behind the wheel, forced her shaking hands to steady on the steering wheel, and drove out of the iron gates that had imprisoned her for too long. The city lights blurred in the rearview mirror as she navigated through deserted streets, uncertain of her destination. All she knew was that she couldn't stop. She'd arranged for a short-term rental apartment under the name Naomi Pierce in a modest neighborhood far from the luxury enclaves Leonard frequented. She clutched her belly, whispering reassurances to the baby inside. Every phone call that came through her cell made her jump. She imagined Leonard's voice on the other end, tearing into her with a fury so potent she might cave. But the calls were mostly from a frantic June Peterson, and occasionally from Daniel, verifying her safe progress. She let out a breath of shaky relief. For the first time in months, Naomi felt the stirrings of hope. She was free for now. When Leonard discovered Naomi was gone, his fury was volcanic. He summoned Michelle, demanding an explanation. With practiced composure, she feigned ignorance, claiming she'd noticed nothing unusual. Yet she couldn't escape his wrath entirely. He hurled accusations of negligence, threatened to terminate her employment, and even tried to implicate her in Naomi's disappearance. Michelle stood her ground, knowing she had left no trail that Leonard's investigators could easily follow. Beyond the personal fiasco, Leonard was dealing with corporate crises. An investment deal in Hong Kong had backfired after Winston Technologies undercut his bid. Large shareholders, including a group led by a prominent investor named Robert Hale, were demanding answers. Rumors about Leonard's unethical practices grew louder, spooking partners and fueling internal strife. Seething and humiliated, Leonard launched a massive manhunt for Naomi. He hired private security firms, coerced ex-employees for leads, and even showed up at June Peterson's hospital ward, demanding her whereabouts. June, well prepared, insisted she hadn't spoken to Naomi in weeks. Enraged, Leonard threatened to sue her for harboring a fugitive. But without concrete evidence, his threats fell flat. Meanwhile, discontent simmered among the Kensington holding staff. Whispers circulated about the boss's unhinged pursuit of his pregnant wife. Some employees quietly passed on stories to journalists, hoping to expose the ugly truth. For the first time in his illustrious career, Leonard Kensington sensed the fortress he'd built was under siege. His wife was gone. His deals were crumbling, and dark secrets were inching into public view. Naomi's temporary apartment was located in a quaint brownstone, owned by an elderly widow named Mrs. Carmichael. The arrangement was simple. Naomi paid in cash, and in return she received a small furnished loft that overlooked a quiet street. Mrs. Carmichael rarely asked questions, though she cast compassionate glances at Naomi's pregnancy. It was as if she sensed the young woman needed both space and kindness. Night after night, Naomi tossed and turned on the modest bed, anxiety gnawing at her. Thoughts of Leonard's next move haunted her. But by day she busied herself with doctor's appointments, focusing on the healthy development of her baby. She attended one at a community clinic recommended by June Peterson, who discreetly arranged everything so Naomi could use her maiden name and keep her medical records off the usual grids Leonard could easily access. Between these medical visits and her interactions with Daniel, Naomi kept busy documenting her journey, writing down every abusive incident she remembered, every threat, every date. Daniel meticulously organized the evidence, consulting with a trusted attorney named Evelyn Carter, known for her fierce advocacy in domestic abuse cases. Quietly, they built a case that would ensure Naomi's safety and future. Each day felt like an uncertain step across a collapsing bridge. Yet for the first time in months, Naomi felt a flicker of autonomy. She was no longer trapped in that cold mansion, tethered to Leonard's cruelty. She was forging a path, however winding, toward a future free from his suffocating grasp. Back at the pinnacle of corporate power, Leonard's world was unraveling. The media had caught wind of rumors regarding questionable financial maneuvers within Kensington Holding. A leaked memo suggested bribery attempts in several developing countries, prompting an investigation by the authorities. Headlines blared across business outlets: "Scandal at Kensington Holding, CEO under scrutiny, and Leonard Kensington's empire on shaky ground." As if that weren't enough, Winston Technologies seized the moment to finalize a major deal with a Japanese conglomerate, one that Leonard had been courting for nearly a year. Investors panicked. Stock prices of Kensington Holding began a downward slide, with anxious shareholders demanding immediate leadership changes. Leonard grew more frantic by the day. He ranted in closed-door meetings, blaming incompetent subordinates. Employees whispered that the true cause was Leonard's own hubris and moral bankruptcy. When an investigative journalist named Maria Lawson approached Michelle for a statement, Michelle stayed tight-lipped, but her silence spoke volumes. Anonymous sources from within the company fueled suspicions of deep-seated corruption. On the personal front, Leonard's private detective turned up no trace of Naomi. The knowledge that his pregnant wife was out there, possibly preparing a legal strike, gnawed at him. At night, he roamed the vast halls of his mansion, alone, overshadowed by the ghost of everything he'd lost. Rather than introspection, however, he stewed in anger. Determined to maintain control, he vowed to crush any threat, whether from his competitors, the media, or Naomi herself. Word traveled fast in certain circles. Leonard's network included not just business contacts, but questionable characters on the fringes of legality. Through back channels, he received a tip about Naomi, possibly staying somewhere in the city under her maiden name. The messenger was an old acquaintance, Vincent Gray, known for shady dealings that skirted the boundaries of the law. Gray hinted that for a substantial fee, he could produce Naomi's exact location. Leonard, fueled by desperation, agreed. A sense of twisted satisfaction coursed through him as he envisioned cornering Naomi. He wanted to remind her that she was still his wife, that she could not simply vanish and expect a peaceful life. In his distorted mind, reclaiming her would demonstrate his power and quell the swirling chaos in his career. Meanwhile, Naomi, unaware of Gray's involvement, went about her fragile new routine. She painstakingly wrote in a journal each night, capturing the complex swirl of emotions she felt. Each page served as a record of her awakening from a naive young bride to a woman forging her own path, burdened by trauma, yet fueled by the instinct to protect her child. But a storm was gathering. Leonard's private war extended beyond corporate boardrooms. On the horizon loomed a reckoning, and Naomi's carefully constructed refuge was about to be breached. Though she didn't know it yet, her greatest test lay just ahead, a confrontation that would expose every vulnerability while forcing her to summon a fierce strength she never knew she possessed. The evening began like any other. The sun dipped behind the rooftops of the quiet neighborhood where Naomi had found temporary shelter, casting long amber shadows down the sidewalk. A cool breeze rustled the leaves as she stepped out of her brownstone apartment, grocery list in hand, and her growing belly supported by one hand. It was a short walk to the corner store, one she had made often in recent weeks, a small ritual of independence that helped her cling to some sense of normalcy. As she made her way along the uneven pavement, Naomi took a moment to breathe in the crisp air. For once, she allowed herself to relax. The city sounds were distant. A couple passed by holding hands. The world seemed for a moment calm, but halfway home something shifted. She noticed it first as a prickling sensation at the back of her neck, the subtle awareness of being watched. She slowed her pace and glanced behind her casually. A sleek black sedan. It wasn't moving fast. It wasn't honking or pulling up beside her, but it had turned the same corners she had kept the same distance, and now it idled quietly on the opposite side of the street as she crossed. Naomi's pulse quickened. Her grip on the grocery bag tightened. She changed direction abruptly, taking a side street that led to a longer route home. The car followed. No. No, no, no. Panic bloomed in her chest. She fought the urge to run, knowing sudden movement could trigger pursuit, and instead walked faster, her breaths coming in short bursts. Her apartment building was just 2 blocks away now. As she rounded the final corner, the sedan accelerated smoothly and stopped abruptly at the curb across the street. The door opened. A man stepped out. He wasn't unfamiliar. Tall, thin, sharply dressed in a dark designer suit that seemed utterly out of place in the quiet residential street. His slicked-back hair and calculated smile made Naomi's skin crawl. It was Vincent Gray, one of Leonard's shadowy business associates. She had seen him once briefly at a private dinner Leonard hosted. His presence had always unnerved her. Leonard had referred to him as a fixer, someone who handled messy problems. Now he was standing in front of her, real, smiling. "Naomi Pierce," he said smoothly, using her maiden name with a mocking tone. What a surprise. Naomi froze. Her instincts screamed at her to run. Her hand automatically moved to protect her belly, a barrier between him and her child. "I've been looking for you," he continued, stepping closer. "Leonard's very concerned. Wants to know how you've been. Misses you dearly." She said nothing. Her throat was dry, her body rigid. "Don't worry," he added, his grin widening. "I'm not here to hurt you. But let's not pretend you can keep hiding. Leonard always gets what he wants." That did it. Naomi bolted. She turned and rushed down the street, nearly tripping over the uneven curb. Her apartment building came into view, its familiar brick facade, like a lighthouse in a storm. Her key was already in her hand, shaking violently as she fumbled to unlock the gate. Behind her, Vincent's voice echoed. "You think you're safe behind lawyers and court orders," he called after her. "That's adorable." The lock finally clicked. Naomi stumbled through the wrought-iron gate and slammed it shut. She ran to the front door, barely able to breathe, adrenaline surging through every cell in her body. Once inside, she turned both deadbolts and leaned against the door chest, heaving. Her grocery bag had been dropped somewhere behind her on the stoop. She didn't care. She was safe, for now. But that fragile bubble she had so carefully built, this sanctuary, had been pierced. Leonard had found her, or at least someone close to him had. As Naomi slid to the floor, her back against the locked door, she wrapped her arms around her belly, whispering softly, fiercely, "I won't let him take us back." Tears blurred her vision, but her fear had already begun, transforming into resolve, into fire. It was time to fight back. Shaken to her core, Naomi rushed to her apartment and locked herself in. Her hands trembled so badly she dropped her keys twice. She dialed Daniel Wu, who picked up immediately. In hushed, panicked tones, Naomi told him about the encounter with Vincent Gray. Daniel assured her he'd contact Evelyn Carter, the attorney, and arrange for additional protective measures. Daniel also reached out to June Peterson, updating her on the seriousness of the situation. Concerned for Naomi's health, June insisted she come in for an emergency checkup first thing in the morning. Stress levels could impact both mother and child, and Naomi's panic was at an all-time high. Michelle too got wind of the news. She risked sending Naomi an encrypted message on a secure chat app. Inside was a crucial piece of information, a leaked corporate memo scheduling a special meeting with Winston Technologies, apparently orchestrated by Leonard in a desperate bid to salvage his reputation. There were references to side deals, hush money, and potential involvement of unscrupulous intermediaries. Vincent Gray's name popped up more than once. Now Naomi had a more comprehensive picture. Leonard was being squeezed from all sides investigations, an imminent corporate collapse, and his personal vendetta against her. While the knowledge that he was vulnerable gave her a slight edge, it also heightened her danger. A cornered beast was far more lethal, and Leonard cold, calculating Leonard was never one to let go without a fight. Early the next morning, Naomi arrived at Evelyn Carter's law office, a cozy, unassuming space in a downtown building. The waiting area smelled of jasmine tea, a soothing balm to Naomi's frayed nerves. Daniel met her there, nodding in silent encouragement as they walked into Evelyn's office. Evelyn Carter was a petite woman in her 50s, but her reputation as an unrelenting advocate loomed large in the legal community. She greeted Naomi with warmth, then swiftly got down to business. Naomi handed over the documents. She and Michelle had compiled proof of Leonard's financial misdeeds, recorded instances of his threats and witness statements from former employees who experienced his emotional abuse firsthand. Evelyn studied every page with meticulous focus. "We have enough for a restraining order," she concluded, setting the stack of papers aside. "And possibly a case for criminal charges if he continues to threaten you. Combined with the corporate fraud allegations, we could negotiate a very favorable settlement, especially custody arrangements." Naomi's chest tightened at the mention of custody. More than anything, she wanted to protect her child. Daniel chimed in. "We have to move quickly. He's already sent someone to intimidate her." Evelyn nodded gravely. "We'll file for an immediate protective order, and we'll freeze any attempt on his part to seize Naomi's assets. Once that's in motion, we can strategize next steps." For the first time in months, Naomi felt a glimmer of empowerment. She wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. She had a formidable team and the law on her side. That evening, while Naomi tried to rest in her apartment, Leonard held a high-stakes meeting with Winston Technologies in a gleaming skyscraper conference room. He had prepared meticulously, assembling a suite of intimidation tactics and last-minute concessions in the hope of securing an alliance that might salvage his empire's reputation. On the surface, he was the suave negotiator, but behind his polished facade, dread gnawed at him. He had received a tip Naomi had hired Evelyn Carter. The name was enough to make his blood run cold. Carter was a known bulldog in high-profile divorce and abuse cases, infamous for dismantling powerful men in court. The timing of Winston's meeting was catastrophic. If Naomi went public with the evidence of domestic abuse and financial malpractice, not only would his personal life erupt into scandal, but Winston would likely pull out of any deal. As Leonard presented slides, hammered through bullet points, and tried to charm the Winston executives, the tension in the room was palpable. His phone buzzed constantly, messages from Vincent Gray, from lawyers, from PR consultants. He dared not reveal his anxiety, but the cracks showed in the sweat lining his brow, the small tremor in his fingers. The Winston executives conferred among themselves, exchanging glances that veiled skepticism. They ended the meeting without a concrete agreement, citing the need for further deliberation. Leonard's gut churned. He could almost taste the downfall creeping closer. When he stormed out into the night, the city lights only mocked him, illuminating how far he might fall. Naomi sat in the corner of Evelyn Carter's law office, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her breath was shallow, her body sore from sleepless nights and the weight of anticipation. But today was different. Today wasn't about fear. Today was about reclaiming control. Evelyn, calm and razor-sharp as ever, stood by the printer as it hummed to life, churning out the last few pages of the legal documents they had prepared. Naomi glanced at Daniel Wu, who nodded reassuringly. Together the three of them had built a wall of truth testimonies, financial records, voice memos, photos of injuries, even the transcript of Leonard's threat about her incapacitation. It wasn't just a story anymore, it was evidence. "You're making the right move," Evelyn said, placing the newly printed documents into a folder. "This isn't just about safety, it's about sending a message. He doesn't own you anymore." By early afternoon, everything was in motion. Court staff filed the emergency restraining order under New York's domestic abuse statute. With the strength of Naomi's documentation and Evelyn's legal prowess, it was approved within hours. A judge reviewed the material, signed off without hesitation, and authorized immediate delivery. At precisely 4:18 p.m., 2 uniformed court officials entered the towering glass headquarters of Kensington Holdings. Leonard was in the middle of a boardroom presentation, flanked by senior executives and international investors pitching a last-ditch partnership strategy to stabilize the company's hemorrhaging stock. The knock on the boardroom door interrupted his flow. A staffer poked his head in. "Mr. Kensington, it's urgent." Annoyed, Leonard excused himself with a strained smile and stepped into the hallway, only to be met with a pair of grim-faced officers. One extended a sealed envelope. "You are being served a restraining order, Mr. Kensington," the officer said flatly. "You are now legally prohibited from making contact with Mrs. Naomi Kensington directly or indirectly. Any violation will be treated as a criminal offense. You've been advised." Leonard's entire body stiffened. For a moment, he didn't take the envelope. His face twisted from confusion to fury in seconds. "You're joking," he growled. "This is not a joke, sir." With a clenched jaw, Leonard snatched the envelope and stormed back into his office, ignoring the burning gazes of his employees, now watching from behind their monitors and glass walls. The door slammed behind him with a deafening bang. He tore into the document eyes, scanning the legal jargon. Each paragraph tightened around his chest like a vice. He must remain at least 500 feet from Naomi at all times. He must cease all forms of communication, calls, emails, messages, or through third parties. He is forbidden from contacting her place of residence medical providers or legal counsel. Violation of the order could result in immediate arrest. His hands trembled. His empire was crumbling, his reputation tarnished, and now, even within the walls of his own company, he had been publicly stripped of power over the one woman he once controlled with ease. In a fit of rage, Leonard hurled the papers across the room. They scattered like ashes. His mind raced. How dare she humiliate me like this, in front of my people, in front of investors? But no matter how many threats he had once used to silence Naomi, he now faced something greater than fear the law. And the law was now squarely on Naomi's side. Leonard's phone rang. It was his lead attorney. He hesitated, then answered brusquely. "They've filed," the lawyer said without introduction. "This isn't just a restraining order. Evelyn Carter's filing for full custody next, and there's talk of cooperating with federal investigators on corporate misconduct." Leonard's world tilted. "Get ahead of this. Stop her." A pause. "We can try damage control," the lawyer said cautiously. "But Leonard, she has momentum and public sympathy." For the first time, Leonard realized he wasn't just fighting a woman, he was fighting the truth. And that was a war he could no longer command. He sank into his leather chair, sweat pooling at his collar, staring out the high-rise window over the city. Manhattan glittered beneath him, uncaring. The same city that once praised his name now whispered rumors of his downfall. He had lost Naomi. Now he was losing control of everything else. As Leonard's legal troubles mounted, Naomi's pregnancy reached its climax. The stress took a toll on her body, and her doctor at the community clinic recommended she prepare for an early delivery. In the emotional whirlwind of fleeing her husband and building a legal fortress around herself, Naomi had barely had time to envision the moment of her child's birth. Yet here it was imminent and unstoppable. Late one night, sharp contractions jolted her awake. Her water broke, and she hurriedly called June Peterson. Within an hour, Naomi was in a small labor and delivery ward, gripping the rails of a hospital bed, beads of sweat rolling down her forehead. Fear and excitement mingled. She felt alone, yet fiercely determined, resolved that she and her child would forge a new life far from Leonard's shadow. Labor was long and grueling. Each contraction tore through her, testing her fortitude. But through every wave of pain, she reminded herself she was doing this for her baby, for a life free of cruelty. At dawn, with the first rays of light streaming into the hospital windows, Naomi gave one final push, and a wail cut through the air. A baby girl entered the world, her cries piercing and alive. Tears streamed down Naomi's face as she cradled her daughter, overwhelmed by a love more powerful than she had ever known. In that moment, everything Leonard had done seemed distant, overshadowed by the fragile miracle she held in her arms. News of Naomi's childbirth soon found its way to Leonard, courtesy of the same underhanded channels he'd used to track her. Upon hearing that he had a daughter, a whirlwind of emotions battered him. Anger because she hadn't told him, jealousy because she shared that moment with others, and a pang of something uncomfortably close to regret. Hastily he consulted with his legal team, demanding to know if his restraining order barred him from seeing his newborn. They cautioned that any direct attempt could be seen as a violation. But Leonard, cornered by professional ruin and personal failure, found himself craving something he'd never truly felt before a connection. In a rare moment of introspection, he recalled the first time he'd met Naomi, how her laugh had been so genuine, how he once genuinely wanted to care for her, though in his own flawed way. A swirl of questions raced through his mind. Had he driven her away irreparably? Was there a path to redemption, or was it too late? Grudgingly, he dialed Evelyn Carter's office, requesting a meeting to discuss potential visitation rights. The irony wasn't lost on him, turning to the very lawyer who was spearheading Naomi's case. But for once, Leonard swallowed his pride. He needed to see his daughter to hold in his arms a tiny life that was half him, half Naomi. Despite every monstrous act he'd committed, a shred of hope lingered that fatherhood might soften the edges of his cold heart. 2 weeks after Naomi's daughter, whom she named Lily, came into the world, Evelyn Carter informed her that Leonard wished to discuss possible visitation rights. Naomi's stomach clenched with anxiety. The mere thought of being in the same room as him again churned her emotions. But she also recognized that legally Lily had 2 parents, and as harrowing as it felt, Naomi had to confront this reality. Accompanied by Evelyn and Daniel, Naomi agreed to a mediated meeting in Carter's office. The tension in the room was palpable the moment Leonard stepped in. He looked haggard, deep shadows under his eyes, his once immaculate suit slightly rumpled. For a brief second, Naomi felt a strange pang of sympathy. Keeping her composure, Naomi allowed Leonard only the faintest glimpse of Lily swaddled and sleeping in a carrier. His gaze softened momentarily, but she also recognized the controlling spark behind his eyes. Leonard stammered that he wanted a chance to be a father to make amends for past actions. Naomi said little, letting Evelyn speak on her behalf. The terms laid out were strict, supervised visitations, no direct contact with Naomi outside of these arranged settings, and no attempt to manipulate or harass her. Leonard nodded, his jaw tight. He had little choice. He was under a restraining order, and his company's stock price was still sinking, intensifying his desperation for a semblance of stability. The meeting ended in an uneasy truce, an arrangement that would test whether Leonard was truly capable of change or simply grasping for control in another form. Over the next few weeks, Leonard showed up at the supervised visitation sessions, each time in a sterile conference room. A social worker watched carefully as he attempted to hold Lily. Naomi, usually present though, shielded by a partition, witnessed glimpses of humanity flicker in Leonard's face as he cradled the baby. But the cold aloofness, the inherent sense of entitlement, never fully melted away. Naomi wrestled with conflicting emotions. She wanted Lily to have a father figure, yet she couldn't ignore the scars Leonard had inflicted. Every time he made a gentle gesture, she wondered if it was genuine or a performance part of a strategy to win back public favor or manipulate the legal system. Meanwhile, Leonard's business troubles escalated. Winston Technologies publicly announced they were ending negotiations due to ethical concerns. Investigations by federal authorities moved forward, zeroing in on suspicious offshore accounts. Michelle from within the company continued to feed Daniel and Evelyn critical intel on new developments, evidence that Leonard's downfall might be imminent. Watching from her modest apartment, Naomi realized that Leonard's supposed transformation hinged on external pressures rather than authentic remorse. If redemption were real, it would come with humility and genuine accountability traits she had never seen him display. It pained her to admit, but she knew she had to stand firm for both herself and Lily. A half-hearted apology or fleeting paternal instinct wasn't enough to erase the years of torment and the very real danger he still posed. The fall of Leonard Kensington did not begin with a thunderclap. It began with whispers. A single leak. A name whispered to the right journalist. A blurred document forwarded from an anonymous source. And just like that, the empire Leonard had built on steel and silence began to crack. Maria Lawson, one of the most respected investigative journalists in the country, had been circling Kensington Holding for months, drawn in by rumors of shadow deals, internal employee abuse, and hush money transfers. What she had lacked until now was a personal story to tie it all together. Then came the envelope, unmarked, delivered to her office at the Capitol Ledger. Inside were excerpts from internal memos, transaction records from shell companies overseas, and a redacted testimony from a domestic abuse survivor. It didn't name Naomi Kensington outright, but the implications were unmistakable. It was a damning portrait of a powerful CEO whose success had been fueled by manipulation, intimidation, and cruelty both in the boardroom and at home. Maria spent weeks verifying every claim. She spoke to former Kensington employees, one of whom confessed Leonard had once threatened to blacklist him from the entire industry. Another revealed bribes made to secure international contracts. She even got a brief off-the-record conversation with Evelyn Carter, who confirmed Naomi's legal filings without disclosing confidential details were deep substantiated and horrifying. When the story dropped, it was a bombshell. CEO of Kensington, holding under fire for domestic abuse allegations, financial misconduct. The Capitol Ledger, page 1. The article was 12 pages long. It named names. It quoted documents. It referenced anonymous testimonies with chilling details. Leonard hurling a vase at his pregnant wife, threatening to destroy her, financially coercing subordinates to cover for him. It painted a clear picture, not just of corporate corruption, but of personal monstrosity. The business world erupted. Stock prices plummeted overnight as investors scrambled to distance themselves. Kensington Holdings board convened in an emergency session. Even Leonard's fiercest defenders struggled to rationalize the headlines. The pressure was suffocating. Shareholders began demanding his removal, citing breach of fiduciary duty and moral collapse. One investor, Robert Hale, who had once called Leonard a visionary, gave a blistering televised interview. "This isn't visionary. It's villainy. Kensington Holding must clean house." That same day, Winston Technologies, Leonard's longtime rival, seized the opportunity to launch an aggressive press campaign announcing their clean corporate record and formal withdrawal from any previous joint venture talks with Kensington Holding. By noon, it was done. The board released a public statement. In light of recent revelations, and in the interest of restoring investor confidence, Mr. Leonard Kensington has been relieved of his position as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. We thank him for his past service and wish him well. No one clapped. No one mourned. Back at the mansion, Leonard watched it all unfold on the giant flat screen in his study. Alone. His reflection in the glass seemed unfamiliar. The once celebrated titan of industry now looked gaunt, hollow-eyed, and aged beyond his years. His empire, built with precision and ruthlessness, had crumbled in a matter of days. Panic surged in his chest. He had thought he could weather the storm, that Naomi's accusations would be dismissed as emotional exaggeration, that his money, His lawyers, his influence would buffer him like they always had. But this time, truth had a face, and behind it stood a woman he had underestimated, one who had once trembled in his presence, and now stood tall under the protection of law, community, and resilience. Naomi, meanwhile, stayed quiet. From her modest home, she watched the fallout with quiet resolve. Lily slept peacefully in the crib beside her. Evelyn and Daniel kept her updated on legal proceedings, custody hearings, divorce filings, asset freezes. But Naomi didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. She simply endured. Because her victory wasn't Leonard's downfall, it was her freedom. The freedom to raise her child in peace. The freedom to sleep at night without fear. The freedom to be something more than someone else's possession. And while Leonard wrote public statements about personal growth and time for reflection, Naomi never looked back. The reckoning was complete, and justice, though delayed, had finally arrived. 6 months passed. The dust settled, leaving Leonard Kensington a fallen titan. Legal battles raged on, but Naomi, shielded by Evelyn's expertise, secured full custody of Lily. She settled into a small, sunlit home in the suburbs, where the baby's laughter bounced off the walls. In this new life, Naomi discovered a strength she never realized she had. She took online classes in business management, determined to chart her own course, financially independent from Leonard's tarnished wealth. With Daniel Wu and June Peterson standing beside her, she navigated each new challenge with measured courage. One weekend, she received a letter from Leonard. Inside, a single page bore his messy handwriting. It was an apology of sorts, disjointed and awkward, claiming he had begun therapy sessions and understood how much pain he had caused. Naomi read it multiple times, her heart twisting with complex feelings. She recognized the difference between regret and true accountability. The letter ended with a plea for another chance, both as a father and, he hinted, as a partner. Naomi set the letter aside, gazing at Lily napping in her crib. She felt only a calm resolve. Leonard's journey to redemption, if it existed at all, was his alone to undertake. She had forged a future where fear no longer dictated her every move, where her daughter would grow up surrounded by warmth and love, rather than cold indifference. At last, Naomi was free, and in that freedom lay the possibility of healing, slow, unwavering, and entirely her own. The remarkable story of Leonard and Naomi's tumultuous marriage, and Naomi's triumphant escape, serves as a powerful reminder of the human capacity for both cruelty and resilience. Leonard's fall from grace was as dramatic as his rise, proving that no empire built on intimidation can withstand the force of truth and justice. Meanwhile, Naomi's unwavering courage became the beacon guiding her toward a life of peace and promise, where her daughter Lily will grow up nurtured by genuine love. If you found this story gripping and insightful, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with friends who appreciate real-life drama, and subscribe to our channel for more compelling tales. Your support helps us continue bringing you narratives that resonate with the strength of the human spirit. Thank you for watching, and remember, redemption can only begin when we confront our darkest truths. Stay tuned for more.